Yo, what is up, everybody? I won't be able to hear everybody, but thank you for coming. I'm Dan Giffin. I'm going to be sharing some fun tips and tricks with y'all today. I want to dive in and kind of get to the meat of why we're all here. It's a lot of ways to make music today. I'm going to mostly focus on not necessarily the nitty gritty details of using Ableton. That's my DAW of choice, but basically just whatever you use, or whether you've never made music or you want to start making music. I'm going to talk to you guys about some tips and tricks. We're not going to go much into music theory. We're going to talk a lot about concepts and things that I've learned over the years producing to help you finish songs, and things that a lot of other Grammy and platinum artists are using to write their songs. About 6 or 7 years ago, I went to a school in New York City called Dubspot, and I met this guy. His name's Ross Kiva. He's worked with George Clinton and Bootsy Collins. He was the founder of Adios Babylon Records. He moved to Jamaica, and now he's working with like all the great reggae dub artists. But he's an Ableton certified trainer. He introduced me to Ableton. When I was growing up, I literally would wake up every morning just feeling like music is something I had to do. It was like a part of who I am. Maybe many of you can relate to that. And so I would wake up every morning being like, I just need to produce music. And I just, after a while playing drums, playing in and out of different bands, I was like, I really want to get into the recording production side, because then I don't have to rely on all those band members that never show up to practice, or they show up like 4 hours late. I want to be able to do my own thing. I want to produce music. And that's how it all started for me. So when I was in New York City, I met this dude, Daniel Wyatt, and he is a platinum and Grammy, Emmy winning engineer. This is the guy next to him is Chris Gehringer, and Chris Gehringer does all the mixing and mastering for Lady Gaga, for Rihanna, works out of Sterling Sound Studios. Daniel Wyatt has worked with Nora Jones, Ultra Records. He's definitely got a lot under his belt. He kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot about mixing and mastering and audio engineering. And so I've been able to bump shoulders and hang out with these dudes in some cool places when I was out in New York City before I moved to Indianapolis, where I'm at today. So Ableton Live, like why? Like why Ableton? There's Pro Tools, like I mentioned. There's Logic Pro. You've got FL. You got all these other things out there. The reason I chose Ableton Live, I actually originally started in GarageBand, which many of us do. And then I figured out, wow, this can only do so much stuff. And then I went into Pro Tools, and then I went into Logic Pro. I got Logic Pro certified. And then I was like, you know what? I want to do something that can do even more, like, because I want to perform live. And that's what Ableton was originally built for, was for live performance. But back in, I think, like version 3, they ended up investing more into what's called arrangement view. That's when it really changed the game, because in Ableton, anybody can make music with Ableton Live. It has a huge draw for electronic music. A lot of people who are into electronic music use Ableton because of the way it's built and designed, but you can literally do anything you can imagine. Some people just DJ with Ableton. Some people just do mixing and mastering and audio engineering with Ableton. Some people just do it for studio production with live instruments. I perform with guitar and drums. This is actually my live setup up here in the bottom left picture. That's me opening up for Tiesto. And I got to play at Electric Forest last year, music festival, if you guys ever heard of Electric Forest, under my project Philia. So I've been really blessed to learn from some awesome people, and to be able to perform my music live and do some really cool things in the last couple of years. Hey, thanks for checking out the webinar. Here's a really quick update before we continue. Just want to let you know that I am now offering online help with your projects in Ableton Live. If you're starting out producing, or maybe you're more experienced, I'm happy to help you on a month-to-month basis. It's super cheap. It's the cheapest it'll ever be. If you go to liveproducersonline.com, click the big fat green join button and sign up for the pro membership. I'll help you one-on-one on a monthly basis. Right now it's $30. It's going to go up. Join the pro membership. I'm going to help you each month producing your music in Ableton Live, give you feedback. If you need help with technical setup or whatever, or routing, I can help you with that too. And it's just an ongoing support for me to help you basically reach your goals with music, however that looks for you. Also, if you're starting out in Ableton Live, you don't know where to start, I'm doing an interactive class online with webinars and discussion groups and ongoing support even after the class. And you click on the courses tab on Live Producers, scroll to the bottom, and you're going to get lots of cool content, and you're going to get one-on-one help with me and get cool stuff. So check it out. And now for the rest of the webinar, which is why you're actually here. So the reason we're all here, and we're going to learn about how to finish songs and produce great music, right? That's what we all want to do. So number one, you want to stay inspired as a musician, as an artist, as a creative person. There's no such thing as 100% success rate. I've found producing music over the last 7 years, you have to give yourself permission to fail and have fun. The best tracks I've ever made usually had a trail of like hundreds of songs that failed before I found that one song that really ended up like going viral, or like I just really fell in love with myself. So you have to give your permission to make crap, and that's okay. And you have to have fun doing it too. That's what music should be. Music should be fun, right? Also, identify windows of opportunity. There's going to be moments where like your friends are like, hey, let's go out and get drunk or whatever. And that's cool. You go out, have fun. You got to do that. But there's going to be times where you need to like dedicate time to actually making music. It's a sacrifice. It's a lot of work, but in the end, it's really worth it. So one of my favorite artists, he talks about comparison killing creativity. Erwin McManus, he wrote my favorite book. It's called The Artisan Soul. Check it out if you ever want to get into it. He's like a famous dude in the entertainment industry, works with a lot of producers and others. But the world doesn't need another deadmau5. Let me say that again. There's one Justin Bieber. There's one Chainsmokers. Well, technically there's two. There's two guys in the Chainsmokers, but you know what I mean? So don't compare yourself to others, whether you're starting out or whether you are, you know, an experienced Ableton user or use FL or whatever song choice you make. You got to be true to who you are. Don't compare yourself to others, because in the end, you're actually going to be disappointed every time, because you are the only you that exists. Ari Herstand, there's another great quote that I learned from him. He's probably the classic case of a DIY producer, a do-it-yourself artist that came from the ground up, like playing on a dirty street corner with a guitar, into actually being like one of the most recognized like producer coaches. And he has an amazing website. It's called aristake.com. Check it out. There's that link on the screen. But anybody can produce music, right, with Ableton. Anybody, anything you can imagine, you can create. It's super cool. It's super dope. But not everybody was born to create music. We all have that friend who thinks they can sing, right? Like there's always that person who's like, yeah, I want to be a famous singer. And then you hear him sing and it sounds like a screaming, dying goat. And you're like, you probably shouldn't be doing this. And maybe singing's not their thing. Maybe they should be producing an Ableton, making electronic music, doing other stuff. That's cool. But you have to ask yourself like why you're doing it. You know, like, why are you doing it? And one thing Ari said that really changed my perspective on music with other people is he says, if you wake up every morning and you feel like you have to make music, like it's a part of your soul, it's who you are, then you have to do it. You got to find a way to make it happen and do it. If you wake up every morning and you say, I want to be famous, if you say, I want to be famous, I want people to like me, then don't make music and save the world the trouble. Like if that's the reason why you're making music is to be famous, you're probably going to fail, or people will just not like you in the end. So you got to just be true to who you are, make music from yourself. I promise we'll go into more detailed stuff and like systematic approaches for creating music. One last thing, find your sound. So Il Gates is a famous electronic music producer today. He says, identity comes from your creative voice and your own personal sound, your purple cow folder. And I love the purple cow analogy. Basically what that means is if your farm is your song and the instruments are the farm animals that make up that song, you need to find your purple cow. You need to find that sound that makes you distinctive. You know, for Skrillex, it's like that dirty, scratchy synth wobble, right? That he makes with like Ableton's operator and Serum and some other plugins. Find that purple cow sound that makes you who you are. If you want to get on a major label or something like that, they're all looking for somebody who has a sound. So think about that. So I'm going to get into what I call the 3 core practices for song success. So these 3 things, if you do all 3 of these things really well, then I believe that, and from what I've learned from Danny and Kiva and all these other great producers who are platinum, these things are going to help you finish tracks and make great music. So the first one being organization, right? So let's go into it. So the first thing is just organize your life and your music and your sounds from the very beginning. Whether you're new to Ableton, whether you've been using it forever, you got to stay organized. So I recommend creating, if you're starting out or you've already been producing for forever, you don't need a sample library of like 16 billion sounds, right? That's not going to help you in the long run. Narrow down your library, find your 5 or 6 favorite kick drums, find your 10 favorite synths that you're always going to use, and just kind of stick to those. And that's going to help define that sound that Il Gates was talking about. Splice.com is an amazing website for collaboration, but they also have something called Splice Sounds as part of that site. You download the app to your desktop, to your computer, And you'll also be able to go in and be like, you know what, I'm having a writer's block. I'm having trouble, but I know my song is in the key of A flat major, right? So if I go and I'm like, all right, A flat major is my key, and I'm producing a song at 120 BPM, you can use Splice's filters, and you can go in and filter that and find exactly the sound or that you need or what you're looking for, down to the BPM, down to the key, down to everything. And it's a really specific way of building out your sample library, and then start to know your arsenal of instruments. So number 2, use Ableton's user library. That's a huge asset. Ableton 10 with the new update made it really easy to organize your browser with like color coding and just organizing files inside files. So take advantage of that and don't go into the mindset of I'm just going to download everything I can. Just find your favorite sounds, stick true to those things. Another thing is backing up files. Shout out to Ben for really, yeah, Caden says Splice is fantastic. Shout out to Caden. He's one of my students too right now. Freaking love that dude. Anyway, so back up your crap for real, because I made the mistake. I've lost 2 laptops in the last 4 years. One, I ended up accidentally spilling kombucha on, and it just kind of destroyed it. And I lost some of my favorite files and projects. It was the saddest day ever. And so back up your files, have folders, organize your folders. Number 4, folders are your friend. So organize your stuff in a way that makes sense to you. It's in the membership. We're going to go on a deeper level of how to do that with a course that I create. Also, short windows of time add up. So that can be confusing too. Like I used to think short windows of time are my time to produce music, and that's not true. I've learned over the last couple of years that is not true. Short windows of time add up for organization. So if I have like 15 minutes before I'm meeting somebody at the gym, or I'm going to like go to my yoga class or whatever. I don't have a yoga class, by the way. I just watch YouTube and do yoga at home. That has nothing to do with this. But anyway, short windows of time actually really add up. So your organization is going to be those 15, 20-minute windows of going in and being like, I'm going to go in and organize my projects. I'm going to like put them into the right folders. I'm going to go through my samples and like weed out stuff I'm not going to use, or put it into different genre categories. That's the time for that. When you're coming to producing a song, those 15-minute windows are not the time where you go and jump into a project and you start producing and be like, I'm going to write a new song right now. That's not the time, because you're going to get cut off if you start hitting that aha moment where it's really good, and then you're going to like have to pull yourself away, and it'll suck out your soul and you'll be depressed because you have to go do something else. And it's also not the time to jump into existing projects just to do little stuff. So 15 short minute windows are your time to organize, and it really adds up. So going into the next core practice, which is what I call producer sessions, we have what I call the pregame. So what can you do when you're away from your computer and you want to produce a track or make music? Use your phone, record ideas for later. Every single one of us that's been producing music has had that moment in their car where they're like driving and it's like beautiful and scenic in the country road or something. And they're like, oh, you know what? I have this melody in my head, or I have this drum beat in my head. And like, it just sounds so good. I'm inspired right now. That's when you have to record it. Otherwise you'll forget it later. It always happens. You'll forget it for sure. So record those ideas, pull out your iPhone, whatever. And then I even drop it into Ableton later and I start building around it, or I try to replicate that sound with those signature sounds that I've already saved when we talked about organization. Stay inspired, change up your routine. If you work the 9 to 5, that's totally cool. I did that. And you got to find ways to stay inspired. Go to concerts of your favorite music, go to art galleries, hang out with people that are going to basically be the people that you want to be. So like, don't be hanging out and just like getting trashed every weekend and being like, yeah, I'm going to be the next big thing, because you won't have time or the energy or like the mental wellness to actually make the music that's true to who you are and actually go places. Also remember, your songs are a conversation. So that's one thing I've really learned too, is you need to be having a conversation with your music, even if there's no words. Like, what are you wanting to express? Write music for yourself. Don't try to write music for other people, because you'll always be disappointed. I guarantee it. Il Gates, once again, he said it in a webinar I watched of him a while ago, where he was talking about, he was writing music for his label, because it was good money and it was safe. And they were basically like, yeah, we want you to be somebody you're not and produce this sound. And it was like sucking out his soul. And the moment he had a breakthrough and ended up becoming huge and was like opening for Bass Nectar and traveling to the biggest music festivals around the world, is when he decided to say, screw it, I'm just going to make music that's true to me. And that's where his best stuff came out. So, that's another thing. Also, create happy accidents. Have fun. I guarantee like Skrillex or a lot of these other EDM artists didn't sit down and be like, you know what? Like, I'm going to sit and create a sound that sounds like everybody else. No, he was just like screwing around in Ableton, playing with sound design and just like finding random stuff and being experimental and having fun. And he created happy accidents that are like his signature sounds today. Also, collaboration is key. Definitely, you need to be a beat scientist. Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely got some rhythm for sure. That helps. Collaboration is key. So work with people that you, I guess, like go and work with other people that are not just people that you are just working with because you need somebody to collaborate, but because you want to collaborate with them. So for example, there was a guy who was actually like pretty well known. I'm not going to mention his name, from Chicago. And we threw down on a track together and it just wasn't really working, but he was actually really famous and really well known. And honestly, I didn't even pursue that song, and because like I just didn't feel like it was true to who I was, and it wasn't turning out the way that I would find my sound. And then I ended up collaborating later with another person, and she wasn't that well known, and she was super talented. She had an amazing voice, and I produced half a track with her. And like I ended up sharing it, and all of my friends and everybody loved it way more than the other track that I started with a famous guy. And so really, like if you find somebody else that like really complements your strengths. So like for me, I am not a piano player. Like I could program and make it sound like I know how to play piano. But if I work with somebody who else plays piano, I'm a drummer. We complement each other really well. So find that collaboration because it's super key. So now we're going to go into a little more detailed technical stuff. Basically, moving on with like the producer sessions, hit songs need to have these four main things. Really, it needs to have that signature sound. It's like if you listen to Odessa, if you guys know who that is, they have like kind of an old school washed out synth sound that they use. If you listen to like Seven Lions, he has like that really bright EDM, like really punchy kick drum and like the really bright EDM sound that's really melodic and happy. Marshmello has like the really high pitched chopped vocals with like really in your face aggressive synths and bass sounds. So find that signature sound, save the instruments that you want to be your signature sound, and continue to use those over and over. Don't feel like you have to keep using new instruments every single song, because then you're going to, after a while of doing that, you're going to be like, what genre am I? And that happened to me. So having a hit song, you're going to have a melody. It's that one thing that like you sing in the shower, right? Over and over in your head of another song, like, Love Story by Taylor Swift or whatever, it gets stuck in your head. You need a supporting rhythm, especially if you're into any kind of dance music or anything. The rhythm and the melody really make up like half of the song. So think about it in those two, like 50-50 split. Like, what's my supporting rhythm? What's my memorable melody? And start from there. Also, as you're building out a song, which I'll talk more in a second about how to do that, think about the tension. So that could be like the build or the pre-chorus, like the build before the drop happens, or like that part of the song that kind of like pulls the listener in a little bit. And then that release could be that drop or that chorus where it's like that main signature sound comes out and pops. Also think about having a curveball. So those are the moments where it's like the element of surprise, right? It's like maybe where you're expecting something to happen and then the drums drop out and it hangs for like one full measure or like 4 beats and then it comes back in. Do that, like throw in surprises and surprise the listeners. People really love that, as long as it's not completely disruptive to the home base of the song. So make sure you come back home. Don't just like change it up randomly in a way that doesn't make sense and change keys all of a sudden. It's like a train wreck or something. But find those little happy surprises to keep it interesting. So this next slide, if you guys haven't seen, or if you don't know what this picture is, then there's a YouTube video that was like of Taylor Swift. I'm not sure if it was really making fun of her, but it's hilarious. There's this goat, like when she came out with her song Trouble like 5 years ago, there's somebody like end up like inserting this goat like singing with her, and it was hilarious. But basically, I don't know anybody else of our time that has like more like mainstream pop hit songs that have like hit radio airtime. Like she's just a multi-millionaire, has made tons of money off of her songs. Yeah, Joey's seen it. He's like, that video with the goats is so good. YouTube it later. But anyway, so this is what I call the mainstream secret sauce of composition. I guarantee if you heard any song on the radio, they probably followed this to like 95% to a T, exactly what I'm about to show you. And every mainstream like hit song is going to follow this order in some regard. It's going to have an intro, right? And that intro could be 4 measures, 8 measures. I'm just going to say bars because it's shorter. Measures, bars, it's the same thing. But basically music really counts in like a series of 4 or multiples of 2. So if I'm counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, that's 4 measures. So then we count it out like this. So the intro could be 8 measures. Verse 1 would be 8 or 16 measures. Pre-chorus is questionable. Not every song has a pre-chorus, but that would be like a 4 measures. And they would jump into the chorus, which would be like that release we talked about. And then that would be like typically 8 measures. Then it would go into an interlude, possibly, or just jump straight into verse 2. And then you have a pre-chorus and a chorus 2, maybe a bridge. The bridge is basically that that disruption of like you have a new part. It's basically like chorus 2.0. It's like a whole new melody line that kind of can get stuck into your head, and it like brings you into a whole new place, and then it pulls you back into the chorus 3. And then you have your outro, which could basically be your intro and just maybe switch up a couple things. So this is what I call the mainstream secret sauce. I challenge you guys to go out and listen to any song that's been on the radio, and yeah, basically just go in and listen to that song and just read this. And I guarantee it'll follow it almost exactly like it's spelled out. I find that when I'm producing music, it's not always the same. I don't always start with the intro. I don't always start with the verse or the chorus. A lot of artists don't either. So it's really one of those things where I might start like with that melody line, that signature sound or whatever, that hook that gets stuck in my head. And that could be my chorus. Maybe it's a lead instrument like guitar, or maybe it's a vocal or something, a vocal line. And then you start piecing these things together, and then you can just start copying and paste all of it. And once you have like your verse, and once you have an intro and a chorus, you're like 60%, 70% of the way there. That's the hardest part. It's just finding that and then making that up with the different instruments. But once you already have like your chorus built out with your instruments and your verse and your intro, it's really a copy and paste game at that point, and then switching up different things to add flavor and that departure and that interesting curveball to create the song. So start thinking of it in series like that, and then piecing it all together. A couple other things to think about as you're producing music. I learned this from Corey Miller. He's a platinum and Grammy engineer at the studio I work at the Lodge Recording Studios. He's worked with like Eminem. He's worked with B.O.B. He went platinum with B.O.B., if you know who that is. John Legend has recorded there. Pink, a lot of other people. Weezer was just there. He worked with. But he told me, we've gotten really tight. Shout out to Corey. Love you, dude. And he told me the 3 times rule. And this is true. So if you're into like mixing, or if you're like producing and you're like just tweaking one thing, he said, if you change the same thing more than 3 times and you don't know what's up or down anymore, you're totally fine. Just leave it and move on. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get stuck in tweak land, and you're just going to be turning the same knob. Be like, I don't know. So the 3 times rule. Once you strike out and you keep tweaking something, whether it's an EQ or a filter, and you're just not sure if it sounds better or not, just leave it alone, move on. The 5-minute instrument rule. So this is something Ben talked about with me earlier today. I threw in. The 5-minute instrument rule is, if you are looking for presets, if you're scrolling through sounds and you're like, do I want this bass sound? Do I want this bass sound? Kind of look at your clock a little bit, or set a timer for yourself. If you're trying to find the right instrument to put into that song, and it gets past 5 minutes and you're still just scrolling through presets and stuff, then you should probably move on to something else and find a different method, or move to the drums, or move to a different instrument, and just kind of find other ways to keep moving. Otherwise, you'll get stuck. I guarantee it. Also, The poop emoji. So space in the mix is your friend. When I was first producing and starting out, I was like, I want that big sound, right? Everybody wants that really big sound, especially in like dance music or whatever. It's like, how do I get that really big sound? And you have to realize that space in the mix is going to be your best friend. Less is more. A lot of times if when you start producing music, I encourage you, if something doesn't sound right or you're not sure, like if you're in a good place, don't be afraid to go through and start muting some tracks. Like go through and be like, okay, well, I'm going to start, once you have a good meat of like a chorus or your verse or whatever spelled out and you're listening through and you've got a bunch of stuff going on, your best friend is going to be like reducing tracks or muting different sounds and saying maybe that doesn't need to be in there or whatever. If you listen to like a lot of your favorite tracks or whatever, even if it's like a huge like dance song or whatever, then a lot of that's a mixing thing more than it is just like throwing more instruments and more sounds into it. So don't clog the toilet of sound. Long story short. Mixing and ear training. So now we're getting into the third part. So now the third part of the chord practice is learning your listening environment, right? I always say that you're only as good as your ears. So you could go out and buy the nicest speakers. You could buy the nicest headphones when you're first starting out. And it's not going to mean anything unless you have the skills or the experience to back it up. A lot of people go out there and they're like, I'm going to go out and buy all the best, most expensive plugins like Omnisphere or whatever. And I love Omnisphere. Don't get me wrong. I love Serum. I love all those things. But especially when you first start to produce music, I highly recommend just to like get the bare essentials of what you really need. Get some great headphones, get Ableton, start going and building a sample library, and then start with that and scale up as you need it and as your piggy bank starts to get a little fatter. Another thing is tune your ears to your speakers. Sylvia Massey, she's worked with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and a lot of really famous Grammy platinum artists. She actually ended up mastering, I think it was like System of a Down or something. I don't remember. It was a couple of different artists and she used just headphones. Like really, she had really great headphones. But I mean, there are people out there who can make great mixes with just headphones. It's a real thing. So investing in good speakers or headphones, like I said, you're only as good as you can hear. Using reference tracks is the one thing I feel like that is literally probably the most underused thing when it comes to finishing a song. So I guarantee there's going to be moments where you are producing a track and you're like almost finished with it. And you go to listen to it in your car and you're like, wow, this sounds terrible compared to like the other song I was just listening to on SoundCloud or Spotify. And that's why you use reference tracks. So when I don't recommend using reference tracks until you're almost completely finished with the song all the way through. That includes producing, mixing, everything. But throw in a reference track and start listening and comparing, and A/B testing is what we call it. A/B test, how loud is their bass? How loud is my bass? How loud is their kick drum? How loud is my kick drum? And then start to compare and contrast. And then take your music places, like whether you just have maybe like, the first 8 measures produced, or whether your song is like getting close to being finished, bounce your song and put it in Dropbox and go into your car, listen to it on your headphones when you're working out at the gym, and take your music places as you're producing it. Because I guarantee you're going to hear things that you didn't hear before. And you're also going to come up with new ideas because you're not like hunched over like your computer, like somebody from the Addams Family in this dark room. And you're just like not as inspired, and take breaks. Definitely take breaks. Another thing that I recommend, whether you're experienced or just new with producing music, is listen to your tracks in front of other people. This is what I call the hyper awareness factor. I guarantee that like there will be moments where if you listen to your song in front of other people, you're going to recognize things you didn't recognize before, even if you heard it like an hour ago, because you get like all nervous and your palms sweat and you're like, okay, what happens? So Casey says, yes, Casey agrees with me. Also take a break, like this king size Kit Kat, right? I mean, you got to give your ears a rest. I personally, when I'm finishing a song and I'm just mixing and trying to polish it off with my speakers and kind of hear what sounds perfect before I share it with the world, I have to take a break. Otherwise your ears will get fatigued and you don't want to wear out your ears. And if you keep pushing through the moments when your like subconscious is telling you, no, you need to take a break, and you're just like, no, but I got to finish this one thing, I got to finish it, or like the world's ending. You got it. That's the clear sign where you literally have to listen to yourself deep down inside and be like, all right, I'm going to step away and I'll come back later, go grab some food, do whatever. um, Take breaks, it'll save yourself a headache. So getting into more of the details of more technical side of things when we're talking about mixing and ear training, the perks. This is what I call the perks, and that spells out panning, EQ, reverb, compression, and saturation. I'm actually in the process right now of developing a mixing course that's going to be pretty extensive that we'll be offering to members for the Live Producers Online site that we'll be launching that I mentioned earlier. And I'm pretty stoked about it, but these are all things that a really good mix has. So this is kind of like a checklist. Go through and be like, are my tracks panned? Did I do proper EQing? Did I apply reverb well to the mix on the return tracks and on individual like signature tracks? How's my compression? How's my saturation? And then using a reference track to compare your mix and hear how it sounds versus other people in a similar genre. And I just straight up just take a file. I recommend using a WAV file, a WAV or an AIFF, or I wouldn't ever use a reference that was like an MP3 unless it's like a 320. That's more on a technical level for you new people producing. But yeah, definitely find a high quality piece of audio and compare your mix. So then that kind of moves us into closer to the end of this, using the right tools. If you're first starting out producing music, I recommend getting a computer that has at least 250 gigabytes of hard drive space. You know, I always say, like, once you go Mac, you never go back, because I love Mac. Shout out to Steve Jobs, rest in peace. There's also the RAM. So your computer processing is going to be a big factor when you're making music with Ableton or any software. 8 gigabytes of RAM is recommended or more, obviously. And get quality headphone speakers. Like I said, you're only as good as your ears. Having a good sample library and instruments, like I mentioned, don't go out and buy all the biggest, fanciest, shiniest toys unless you need it. And learn what you have and scale up, because otherwise you'll just have a bunch of other junk laying around. You don't want to be like on the episode of Hoarders Music Edition. Nobody wants that. So last but not least, when is your song finished, right? Like, how do you know that your song is finished or getting close? And Techno Funktronic says, I can't stop buying shiny toys. I know, guys, we have the most expensive hobby. It's very true. It's an addiction that's like a healthy addiction, but not really when it comes to like our wallets, but that's okay. It's worth it. It's therapy. You can just write it off as that. So when is your song finished? Kiva, the guy that taught me Ableton 7 years ago, he said, your song is finished when you can listen to it from the very beginning all the way to the end without any urgent fixes. If you listen to it from the front to back and there's not a moment where you're like, oh shit, like you jump out and you got to like fix something, then you're fine and it's done and it's good. So that's when you know. And there's always going to be things you could change later. So don't sit around on it forever. Like, what would happen if Bob Ross, like in the middle of like his painting, was just kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna like kind of leave this and come back to it in like 4 years. You know, the show would be way too long. People would just be sitting there looking at a half finished canvas for 4 years. So perfectionism is actually procrastination. I heard that. And Casey. So perfection is procrastination. It's true. Like, for a while, I was always kind of like, yeah, I'm a perfectionist. So, you know, I'm just gonna like keep working on it and it has to be perfect. And you become obsessive over it. And it's like this controlling thing over you. And really, that just means you're a procrastinator. Just get it done. Like, and give yourself breaks and take time with it and don't force anything, because otherwise you're going to give yourself a headache and it's not going to be your best work of art. And that's really what it comes down to. And then last but not least, like, be vulnerable, guys. Like, put yourself out there. Like, insecurity is really just selfishness at the bottom line. And think about that. Like, I heard it said really well from a pastor I met in New York City. And I asked him, I was like, when you're speaking in front of like hundreds of thousands of people at conferences, like, don't you get nervous? Like, how do you maintain like that mental thing? And I was thinking, for me, it's on stage playing in front of a lot of people. And he was like, well, why would I be nervous? And I was like, because you're in front of a ton of people. He's like, yeah, but that just means that I'm being selfish. I have a lot of pride because my attention's on me. And I thought that's really true. So don't hoard your music and keep it from the world. Be vulnerable and put it out there and be true to yourself. And there's going to be people that don't like your music. There's going to be people that love it. And the people that do love it, just pour into those people and just love the hell out of them, because they'll love you back, and you'll grow a following and a strong fan base that way, and build community around your music for sure. So those are kind of the main things I wanted to go over with you guys today. Addie's like, this is the therapy session I needed. So I love you, Addie. She has an amazing voice, by the way. Shout out to her. We've collabed on a couple of things in the past. So back to what we were talking about earlier, this new Ableton membership site that we're creating. It's going to be more than... I hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you want to subscribe to future webinars, you can go to liveproducersonline.com, click the webinars tab, see upcoming events. If you join the membership, you can actually replay all webinars, mostly teaching tips and tricks and specific things on a technical level using Ableton Live to better your music and to help you reach your goals producing music. Also, I would be glad to have you part of the interactive Intro to Ableton Live Production course, where you can have interactive access with me and a group of other producers to help you get started producing in Ableton if you're new. If you're more experienced, consider joining the Pro membership, and I can help you with whatever support you need using Ableton on an ongoing basis every month. Thanks again for joining. I'm Dan Giffin, and I'll see you guys on the other side.